All right, so I'm going to go over how to do the oil pastel practice techniques. So in the first video, we laid out this page together and labeled some areas. I had you write opaque solid, blending, and neat edges because that is what you're going to be graded on. We have an area for flat colors. We have an area for flat mixed colors. We have 2 to 3 color smooth transition, 2 to 3 color textural. Down here, I have a ribbon transition, which is probably the hardest technique on this whole page, and then some area for sgraffito. So since I've already worked on this one, I am actually going to be just working on this worksheet here, which has all the same areas. It just looks a little bit different. So what you're going to need for this assignment or practice is your set of oil pastels. So I'm going to set that to the right because I'm right-handed. You're also going to need a paper towel. This will be to clean your oil pastels once you start mixing. And then you'll also need a toothpick or something else to scrape with. So if you don't have a toothpick at home, that's fine. You can use the end of a paintbrush. So I have a paintbrush right here. I could use that. It's going to be for scraping. Once you see what we do, then you might have a better idea of what to use. So you could also use a mechanical pencil just with the lead pushed in. So get those things, join me back here, and we will get started. All right. So the first thing we need to talk about, warm and cool colors, is all based on this fabulous color wheel. Actually, any color wheel. So the idea with warm colors is that they are the colors that remind us of things that are actually warm. So red, orange, yellow, things that remind us of fire or the sun. And then cool colors are on the opposite side of the color wheel, green, blues, and violets. And those are things that remind us of like ice or cool water, things like that. So you're going to be choosing any 3 warm colors and any 3 cool colors to color in just solid areas and kind of get the hang of it. When you look at your set, if you have a set like this of 25, you're going to notice you see the traditional reds, oranges, yellows, but there are other warm colors in this set. So peach and pink are warm colors. They are just tints of red and orange, so it's the color with white mixed in with it. These browns are also warm colors. They are darker versions of a warm color, orange or red. Cool colors, the blues, we have a lot of blues. There's 3 or 4 blues. We have light green, dark green, olive green, and then 2 violets. So think about that as you choose any 3 warm colors and any 3 cool colors. What you're not going to choose is black, white, and gray. Now we are just starting to get into color theory. We talked about complementary colors, which are opposites, but black, white, and gray are actually colors that have no hue. So they are just values. So white, obviously, is white, and then we have gray, which has a little bit of black, and then more black or darker would be black. So do not choose black, white, or gray for this first set. Do choose a color that you consider warm or is considered warm. So when you color with oil pastels, we're going to be thinking about light layers. Light layers of oil pastel. I know, you didn't know I could sing also. So that means that as I start to color, I am using a very, very light touch. Now the nice thing about oil pastels is that they are super blendable. One other thing I forgot to tell you, use a guard sheet when you want to stay inside the lines. So I can set this right up next side to that line, and then I can color right to that edge. As long as you have a straight edge, you'll be able to get all the way up to the edge. But honestly, on your worksheet, you have those thicker black lines. You should be able to do a pretty good job of just staying inside of the lines without a guard sheet. So my first layer, you could see that it was like scratchy, that you could see a lot of pockets of white paper. So the idea is that opaque, when we make an opaque covering, that you build it up so it is thick throughout and that we can't see any of the white pockets of paper. And also you want to do this so that you use your light layers and build it up so it's not see-through. I think I just said that 3 or 4 different times. So one thing you might notice is some colors are more transparent than others or tend to not be as even. And that is just something that you're going to learn about each color. For instance, usually red is pretty hard to build up to be a solid covering everywhere. But what I want to pay attention to is, can I see thinner areas or thicker areas? And I want it to be all the same thickness. So as I zoom in just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get all the way up to the edges. When I want a flatter, smoother area, I'm going to work with the part of the oil pastel that is smoothed down. So this is smoothed down. Now I have parts of the oil pastel over on this side that have more of that edge. So when I want to get right up to the edge, I can use the edge of the oil pastel. Now a lot of people ask, are there sharpeners for oil pastels? There are not. What you do is you kind of continually rotate your oil pastel until you catch an edge, I call it. So really light layers. This should blend pretty easily together and get right up to that edge. If you see any crumbs, this is where you could use your toothpick to help get rid of those crumbs. You could try just to wipe it off. Now you might end up smudging. So here's the thing with oil pastel. We never, ever, 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 ever smudge. We don't want to smudge with our finger. We don't want to smudge with a paper towel. We don't want to smudge with a blending tool. And we don't want to smudge with like something like baby oil. I know some people do that. So just try to use it in this new way and see what kind of ways that you can grow in your artistic practice. Alright, so the next thing you're going to do is you're going to pick 2 other warm colors and finish that area over there. Then you're going to pick 3 different cool colors and color those in solid. Next you're going to go to this flat mixed colors area. You're going to use light layers, alternating colors to create new mixed color in each box. Here's what I do is I will look at my set and I will say, what is a color that I don't already have as an oil pastel? So for instance, like there is this light orange. So I really don't want to mix my orange and my yellow because I already have an oil pastel that's that color. The idea here is to make new colors that don't already exist in your box. So you could take one of like the yellows and add like white to it to make a very pale yellow. You could try to make a darker version of violet. That's actually something I'm going to try. So I'm going to take violet and I'm going to take light blue, and because there's not really a dark purple or violet color. So when you do this, again, we're going to use those light layers. So this violet is going on the first layer and I want it to be even throughout. Ultimately, when I'm finished, I want it to look like a brand new color, like I have this stick of oil pastel in my set. So here's the second layer, which is the blue. So when I use a sharper edge of my oil pastel, that almost tends to scrape out. So we want to be careful of that. So sometimes if I do have a sharp edge and I don't want it, I will use my paper towel to soften that edge and get a larger, flatter, broader area. So I have 2 layers. I can still see pockets of the paper, and I'm headed for the 3rd layer. And right now I see that it is starting to blend together, but it still looks mostly blue. So I'm actually going to hang out and use this violet or the lavender color a little bit longer, because I want it to be more of a dark violet rather than the blue. Sometimes those dark colors tend to take over. So this takes patience. It's not going to be done in just one solid layer by pressing really hard, or even two, because they won't blend together. All right, this is actually a really good spot to kind of zoom in, and hopefully you can see the quality of the oil pastel. So what I'm noticing here is that there are thicker areas and there are thinner areas. So it's not all the same opacity or thickness everywhere. So these colors do not like to blend easily with each other. And I think it's because one's very light and one's very dark. So I am going to be using the lighter color here to kind of push some of that mixed color into a thinner area. Something that will happen with oil pastel is that it will heat up. So both the stick and the oil pastel on the paper will get warm because you are dragging this along. It is using friction to transfer, and that makes it so that it sometimes gets too thin or softens, kind of like butter softens when it gets warmer. Your oil pastel will get thin, so that's something you have to watch out for. So I'm going to continue to work this back and forth. Here is a little secret or a tip. A lot of times white can act as a blending tool and it doesn't lighten it up. So I'm actually looking at this and I'm seeing that it's still pretty splotchy, which means it's thicker in areas and thinner than others. So I'm going to do a layer of white. Even though I don't want to lighten it that much, what it's going to do is it's going to give me an overall thicker covering. So there is my layer of white. It did lighten it up quite a bit. And now I'm going to go back with my violet and smooth it out. And actually, that did the trick. So if you're having a hard time blending two together and they're not doing a good color blending or mix, you can try adding a little bit of white to it. All right, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Right here, you're going to choose two different oil pastels and make another new color. So a transition is really similar to how we did this in colored pencil. So we're starting with light layers again, and we're going to have them overlap in the middle, and where they overlap in the middle, that is where the blending and fading is going to go on. So for the gradual change, I would recommend two colors that are similar in value. So two light colors or two dark colors. I'm going to use this dark blue, and then I'm going to use this dark green, and they kind of look like they're the same color, but they're not. So let me get a different green so you'll be able to see hopefully a little bit better. So I'm going to take half or more, and I'm a really light layer with my one color, and I'm going to extend maybe 3/4 of the way across. Then I'm going to take my other color and I'm going to go the opposite way. So the whole time I'm doing this, I'm actually not doing this really well while I'm demonstrating, but while you're doing this, you do want to start to control your edges or have neat edges in there. All right, as I drag the green on top of the blue, I should start to see some blending in there. So this is the first layer. I can still see pockets of white paper. I'm not finished. So now I'm going to move in a different direction, and I am going to start in the only blue area, and as I move across, I'm not increasing my pressure. I'm actually just building up another layer, and now as I get into this middle area, you can see that it's starting to blend with that green. I'm going to go back this way and blend. So I'm getting there. I have about 2 layers, but I'm not done. It's not completely covered. So this third layer, you can see it's really starting to build up and be a lot more solid. Again, I'm going to kind of work back and forth in the middle now because it's doing more mixing of the color. So this blue, this is pretty interesting. I guess I never noticed this about this blue. It is pretty streaky. It does not want to get solid opaque. It wants to be splotchy, so it's thinner in some areas and thicker than in others. So it just means that I need to work that area a little bit more, lay off the pressure, dial it back. Here's my green, green, green. I have some area that's solid green. Now I have this area of mixed green and blue, green and blue. So once you start to build up those more solid areas, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the idea is that this fades very gradually. Now, this green and this blue, for some reason, are very transparent in some areas and thick in the other. So I think I'm going to add a layer of the white. It shouldn't lighten it too much, but it's going to kind of act as a blending, and it also makes it so that my colors are just a little bit more opaque and solid. So just one layer of the white. This actually isn't my last layer. I'm going to lay that down, although that actually improved a lot. I'm going to come back on top with my green, and that really did the trick. So it lightened it up a little bit, but really what it did is it made it so I can layer the oil pastel more evenly. So this area is still thin in here, and I think I've been working a little bit too much. I'm going to let that cool off a little bit, and I'll come back and try to get that thicker. All right, a transition with a textural change, 2 to 3 color textural transition. So this one you're going to want to choose 2 colors that are very different in value. So you could actually do black and white, you could do yellow and red, but you're going to get the highest impact on this if you actually choose some very different colors. I'm going to choose violet and yellow. So we start out the same way. I just noticed this oil pastel is dirty, so I'm going to clean it off. This one's a little dirty too. Starting off the same way, textural means that I can see the mark of my oil pastel, but you're really not going to be able to do that until you build up a thick covering. So here's my just yellow. As yellow and violet blend together, they make kind of a brownish color. Even with textural, you are going to want to make sure that we don't see the paper underneath. So I'm going to continue to build this up, and I'm using one directional marks. And textural means it is intentional, so that you can intentionally see my lines moving from side to side. I could use a diagonal, I could use up and down, but I should still have a gradual change of value in the middle, or color in the middle. So if you haven't figured out already, oil pastel takes patience, and if you haven't figured out in art class that all art takes patience, this is one of those things. So in between there, I should be seeing a pretty good fading of color, but then I also see the marks or the lines made from the oil pastel. So I still need to build this up to be thicker, but I'm going to move on. All right, your ribbon transition. You are going to use a light, a medium, and a dark value to make that ribbon appear as if it is three-dimensional. So here is an example. I used white, that is my light value. I used green as my medium value, and I used black as my dark value. What I have here is just a little mapping of the values. So I am thinking about this ribbon as a three-dimensional object, and whatever part of that ribbon is closest to me is going to be the lightest area. And then whatever part of that ribbon is moving away from me is getting darker and darker. So as you can see here, I thought this part of the ribbon is popping out the most. There is the lightest part, and then it curves away from me. It goes to medium to dark. So you're going to use either a textural or smooth transition. On this one, I am going to use I'm going to use yellow, orange, and red as my values. So the lightest one, I'm going to map it out, and then it goes into a medium, it gets farther away from me, and then it gets darkest. So light, medium, and dark. Here will be a medium. As I think about that little sliver there, there's probably a shadow where that overlaps that, and then medium, and then maybe medium, light. Now, based on how you drew your ribbon, your values might be in a different spot. So I am just first kind of eyeing where these go and mapping them out, and then I'm going to work more in a section to get them to fade. So transitions fade. So that means that these should overlap each other. And I'm not just going to work up and down when I shade or color. I'm going to work side to side. And it's the both directions that help you blend to get rid of those bands of color so that it's not just one color and it stops and switches to another. All right, Sgraffito's probably the most fun one on here. Here you can use a heavy pressure. What you're going to do is you are going to color the first layer, because we're going to use 2 layers. Press hard, color the first layer, and I'm going to use a couple different colors. There might be crumbs, but you shouldn't be pressing so hard that you break your oil pastel. So here is my first layer. You could do a tie-dye design, you could do a rainbow, but you're going to use light colors on the base layer, and then you're going to use a very dark color on the second layer. And the second layer, you do have to press hard again. You don't really want to mix it in that much with the colors that you put down for the first layer. And smooth it out, cover up all that first layer. And now you need a tool to scrape out. So that could be the toothpick, that could be this end of a paintbrush, I don't know, a bamboo skewer. I'm going to use a pencil, mechanical pencil with the lead poked in. You are going to scrape, and when you scrape, it is going to take away the top layer. You're going to scrape line designs and patterns. So it's going to scrape away your top layer, and it's going to show the layer underneath. So I used light yellow and orange. So if I make a mistake, I could just color it back and then scrape out. So you're going to do 2 different experiments with Sgraffito where you draw line patterns. You don't want to just scrape out the whole area. That kind of defeats the purpose. So use lines to do designs in those areas. So when you're finished, all of these areas will be finished and covered. They will all be opaque or solid. You're blending, so here it will look like you have 2 brand new colors. You can't see the 2 separate ones. Here your blending will be so gradual you can't tell where one color stops and the next starts. Same thing with this textural transition. You just can see marks. Ribbon transition again should be gradual, and then the sgraffito area. So let me know if you have questions, and have fun.